Natasha Smith is a wife, mother, and writer from North Carolina. Her work has appeared at Her View from Home, Focus on the Family, and Today Parents. You can find Natasha online at imnatashasmith.com. In her new book, Can You Just Sit With Me? Healthy Grieving for the Losses in Life, she writes, give yourself permission to grieve. Tears streamed like water piercing through a broken dam. Days, months, and years prior, I hid my sadness like a game of hide and seek. If you asked me about it, maybe I would share a cookie cutter response. Everything's fine. But 2020 brought quarantine. My routine thrown out the window, kids 24/7, and homeschool. During that time, the grief knocked harder. Mom, what's wrong? My 5-year-old's voice sounded pinched. It's my sister's birthday and I'm sad because I can't celebrate it with her. Nothing new had happened. My sister had been gone for over 9 years. But 2020 made the grief unbearable to me. When I cried, my 5-year-old consoled me. It's okay, Mama. It's okay. She grabbed my arm. Unknown to her, she was permitting me to grieve. So I sat at my desk instead of running to the other room, and I cried right there. She asks, have you ever bottled up your sadness? Ooh. Have you ever hidden your tears, pain, or grief? Have you ever avoided questions about your loss? Have you ever thought no one cares? Me too. Maybe you are waiting for permission to grieve. Is permission needed to grieve? What role does culture, family, and upbringing play in the way you grieve? How do you permit yourself to grieve? In my conversation with Natasha today, I sincerely cannot wait to bring some hope and perhaps even answers to those questions. Grief is all around us. It's in the atmosphere in this post-pandemic world in which we live. So grab a pencil, paper, cup of something delicious, as you know we like to do here, and set some time aside to perhaps allow your heart and perhaps to give your heart the permission it needs to grieve.
Sometimes the story we tell ourselves is not really true. Sometimes the story others tell about us is not really true. Here on today's Heart Lift with Janelle, we are going to learn how to rewrite our story. So pick up your favorite pen and journal, grab a cup of something delicious, and start your heart-lifting journey towards living a meaningful life.
Hello and welcome to today's Heart Lift. We have with us, as I have said already, Natasha Smith, who I've now been given permission to call Tasha. And she's just a beautiful human. And I'm so excited to have her with us today to talk about a subject that perhaps we have not really delved into. We touched upon it here and there, of course. We've talked about pain and loss, but we're going to really dive into what healthy grieving looks like. And Tasha's going to offer us a biblical grief model. Her new book, and the title I just told her was what took my breath away. Can you just, and that word just, we've talked about that word just here quite a bit. And I want to know why you put just in there, but can you just sit with me? Tasha, that title. Did you come up with that? I always ask this because I know I have a lot of women, men in my community who really want to publish their books. And so I love to talk about the author side of this for a minute.
Yes. First, thank you so much again for just allowing me to sit with you today and to talk about this subject. But yeah, can you just sit with me? I came up with that title.
Sure.
And It
good
was
one.
birthed out of 2020.
Okay. Tell us more.
Yep. So birth out of 2020. And to me, I've been on this grief journey for over 30 plus years, like over half of my life.
Oh, wow.
And but 2020 was the catalyst of this feels like grief. Like everywhere you turn, there was dead bodies, there
Yes.
was racial
Yes.
injustice, political
Really
divide.
bad.
And it was everywhere. Like you could not escape it. You couldn't even escape it in the church. Yeah. So it was just so dark. And I said, having been grieving for so long and really stuffing it and not have dealt with it, 2020 was like, okay, this is grief and you've been feeling this. And I could not escape it because we're confined to our homes on top of that.
We sure as heck were. Don't you remember? I remember the moment I was actually sitting right here. And the governor's report in Virginia came up and said, you can't leave your house until June 16th. And I thought, that's a joke, right?
Right.
I think it's like the end of March or beginning of April. And I thought,
yeah,
right. So we were confined to be refined is how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's powerful. And I
think it's so true.
Yeah.
At least in my life, it was like a journey into the wilderness.
Yes.
Here are all the things you have used busy to cover.
Yep.
I take it all away.
Exactly true.
Church.
All the things.
All the things. Trappings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So here you are. Your words say dark, hopeless.
Yeah.
Full of desperation and despair. And all of a sudden, the dam breaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so the dam breaks but no one's listening.
Ugh. Heartlifter. I know that. Somebody or somebodies are going, yep. I'm right there right now. Nobody's listening. Okay. Why did you feel that way? I'm so curious.
Yeah. I think the combination of my own grief and then what was happening in our world at the time. So in my own grief, up until this time, seriously, I didn't feel like I had a safe place to talk about my grief and that anyone really cared to listen.
Yeah, really listen.
Really listen.
Like, take a seat and can you just sit with me? Listen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, had listened to one of your podcast episodes and learned a new term, spiritual bypassing.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, wow, I'd experienced it, but hadn't put a word to it.
I know. I'm so grateful. I don't know who coined it. I don't think I know. If I do, I don't remember. But I'm so deeply grateful that we now have a vernacular. We have the words to put around what you felt, what I have felt, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was
everything's fine. It's all good. Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
Sister, just praise him. Dig deep. Let not your heart be troubled.
Exactly.
This too shall pass.
Yeah. So that was what I was experiencing. So I didn't feel like I had a space to really express how I was really feeling. And so that paired with, again, what was happening in our culture, no one was listening to anyone.
I know.
Like everyone was speaking, quote unquote, their truth, but they weren't listening or cared to listen to what other people had to say, how they may have been feeling, how things may have deeply affected them. I'm like, what is going on? Can you just sit? Can you just sit with me? Not to interject your opinion, but to really hear my heart.
And to debate, because my mother died in August of 2020. So in assisted living, early in, hopeless, first one to pass in her assisted living, couldn't be with her, couldn't go to the ER, couldn't be there. Just absolutely.
I'm so sorry.
I know, but God was there. I know he was with her, and he orchestrated all of those events. I have to believe that in my grief process. I think what I felt so frustrated with is what you're saying and bringing to the table is that I don't want to hear your political views on all of this.
Yes.
Just go in. Like I had so many people say, just storm the gates of the ER. I'm like, there are policemen outside. Guns. I don't really think I can do that. And then my children were like, Mom, you can't. We can't afford to lose you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's like, you probably could have named it. Can you just listen to me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you just sit with me? I think both of those are very appropriate. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. We're on your journey. Somebody just sit with me. How did you deal with that? I mean, it provoked anger in me, frustration, confusion, deconstruction of my faith, if I'm honest. How did you cope with that, if I could ask you that?
Mm-hmm. I feel what I've learned is grief needs a place to go. It has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And as I kind of mentioned earlier on, I would stuff it, push it aside, but it just bubbled up. I mean, I could not push it down any longer.
I know. It
And
just
so,
kind of,
right. It's just right there. And it needs a place to go. And at the time, I still didn't have like a safe place, like a safe community to really express. And so I started writing.
You wrote a book.
I wrote a book. I'm like, what?
What? I got to get it out of me. Good girl. Bravo. Bravo. I'm so proud. Have you always wanted to write? Has writing been a therapeutic practice in your life? No.
No, the craziest thing. No, I'm an engineer by degree. I spent
I envy that left brain.
Right?
I do. I envy it.
12 years I spent at my career as an engineer in the pharma industry, and then God called me to homeschool.
Oh boy. Woohoo.
7 years ago.
Before COVID?
Yeah, before COVID.
Okay, me too. That's part of my journey. Yep, homeschooled for 14 years. Yeah, I'm like, excuse me, I have things to do. Called you to homeschool before 2020. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a massive transition. That's a whole nother podcast. Yes.
Massive. Yeah. Yep. It's a little pocket in the book.
Okay. Go ahead and share then. I'd love to.
Yeah.
In what chapter? I don't have a physical copy because it's not out yet. It doesn't come out till September 26th. Oh, I am an impatient woman right now. But you can pre-order it, Heartlifters, which, I always tell you that's a mass boost authors. So you can pre-order that. And when you go to look at it on Amazon or wherever you find your books, you can see the chapter titles. So which chapter is that transition story part of?
Yeah. So that story is going to be found in chapter 10, A Revealing Grief.
Oh, I wasn't going to go there. A revealing grief. Natasha. Okay. Would you share more?
Yeah.
Okay.
So part of that journey, that transition from being in corporate America to homeschooling, I felt the call so strong. I mean, I've never had a thought about, homeschooling or that being a part of our family. And I felt that call, and my husband jumped on board. It's like, God said it. We're gonna do this.
You're called to homeschool. Woo! Left corporate America.
Yeah, and so I'm starting this thing, and it's new, of course, and so it was challenging to me because I was like, how do I do this?
You think?
This transition. But what surprised me most was that I was grieving. Wow. What I left, even though I have made the decision to leave my career, oh my gosh, it was the hardest thing. And I still, even to this day, 7 years, almost 8 years later, I'm still challenged with that at times.
Oh yeah. So what you're saying to us, though, this is like a revealing grief for the transitions, the losses, which is what I love that you're covering in this book. Grief on all sides, like the prism of grief can be a prism of pain, loss, transition. Okay. How did you manage that revealing grief?
Having really to go before the Lord and Him helping me to see what He had already seen in me before the foundations of the world, truly. It's
Mm.
really just grasping and finding that identity in Him. Because what I'm finding is as I'm moving through life and I may have these different, maybe I'll call them attachments, or
Yeah.
labels that
Yeah.
we bring on, because even homeschool mom, so I'm getting
Oh,
more comfortable in this, but then I'm feeling like, okay, so I have my oldest daughter, she's a junior, and she's going to be graduating next year. And so I'm like, okay, I'm already starting to feel this next transition.
yes.
And
How old's your
so
baby?
the baby is 7.
No. Woo, you've got the expanse. Okay.
Yes. Even now, starting to feel this little tug, like, okay,
Mhm.
this is will be another season of letting go. Or what I've found is the more that I attach my identity to who I am in Christ, it's going to
Yeah.
give me a sure footing and
Hmm.
foundation as we go through these transitions in life.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
so that has been more of the stability I'm fine.
Yes. I call it like a prophetic footing. What
Uh,
am I standing on? What's my
yes.
footing for this?
Hmm. Hmm.
What is when everything else around me is shifting? It is
Hmm.
that solid ground that I stand on. And that is up to you. So I'm hearing here that you've learned the power of expression rather than repression. Is that the journey you would say that you repressed your
Yeah.
grief, you said, for 30 years?
Yeah. Hmm.
So your journey, all of this therapeutic writing, all of this observation that you are doing with the world around you, you're now wanting to be that voice. And in this community, we equate voice with value, worth, and dignity. Prophetic footing, is on I have value, worth, and dignity. I have no attachment other than to Christ himself, which is a daily work, is what you're doing.
Yes.
But it's fair to say that you now want to be that voice to help all of us express instead of repress.
Absolutely.
So 30 years is a long time,
It
a
is.
very long time. I know that heartlifters want to know where your journey of grief started.
Hmm.
It was 30 years ago.
Yeah. So it started with a miscarriage.
Oh, yes. I've had that. That's so hard.
It started with a miscarriage, and
Mm.
and that journey, I was so young. I was actually in my teens. I was a teenager. But this story is, I recently started seeing a counselor.
Ooh, big move.
Big move.
Big move. Look at your face. You're like, big move.
Yeah. And so 3 sessions in,
Ooh.
she asked if she could take a break.
Oh, wow.
Because
She needed a break.
she needed a break
Okay.
because it was a bit much for her. And we started doing a timeline of the grief, of my grief.
Oh, good. Oh, wow.
Started with that. And we only made it through high school.
And this is post book writing?
Post book writing.
What?
Yes, let me tell you that. Yeah. Post book writing. Because before, like I said, 30 years, I haven't done any grief work. 2020 was like, boom, you need to do something. You got,
Mm-hmm.
get the grief out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote, and then this is after, like, all of my edits are turned in. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I need to see someone.
This is so relevant and powerful. And even for those of us who just therapeutically write,
Yeah.
expressive writing, they call it, just get it on paper. You may never write a book, but
Yeah.
you are writing your book when you're writing this journal and you're processing. But even in my own history of work with the 3 books that I have, the work came post writing for most of them. Still, okay, that's good on paper. Now it's time for me. Yeah, it like opens the door to a
Yes.
greater expansion of your capacity. So, okay, she needs a break. What on earth? That's amazing.
It was so free. I felt super affirmed. Like,
Uh-huh. Sure. Like, okay, good. You think it's a lot too.
right. Exactly.
I'm not crazy.
Exactly.
I know. I can get that for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes. All right. Very affirming. How long was that break? 5 minutes? 3 weeks?
Right. Several weeks.
My goodness.
Hmm.
Okay. And what was your response to that? Just the affirmation or just like, okay,
Well,
hmm,
it was kind of the same. I mean, I was kind of feeling how she was feeling myself because
mhm.
it's a lot.
It
And
is.
it's pretty much because I have had a succession of loss, like loss after loss, like, and
Okay.
so it's kind of like when I start to think about one loss, another one occurred.
Yes. Yes.
And so it was so hard to really unpack one of those.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so, you know,
Sorry.
and no, you could. And
I'm
so,
like, I know.
and so as I was speaking with her, or we had met like the previous couple of sessions, and we had started kind of not even really unpacking, but just kind of talking about the timeline. I mean, I was already kind of feeling like, oh, maybe I need to kind of maybe think about like one right
Right.
now. Yeah, so had kind of become overwhelming for me too. So we were kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, we can take a little break.
Yeah. Which is a very significant, if anybody listening is a helping professional, mental coach, therapy, human being,
Yeah.
when you are called to sit with someone, which we all are, just to listen, I think that is, she is good, number one, because I sit with so many people and it's very difficult to say we need to take a break because you feel like you're going to lose the momentum, right?
Right.
But I have learned the hard way not to keep pushing. So I love that you brought that point up and that you received it well. Okay. So a lot of grief, grief upon grief, loss upon loss. Okay. When you picked that back up, have you picked that back up? I'm just curious. No. Okay.
We started talking
This
about
is
some other
fresh.
things.
You started talking about other things. Okay.
Yeah, other things that could help in, like what's going on currently in life. Because
Mhm.
I've had a nephew who was murdered.
I know. I
And
saw that.
so,
Please tell us if you will. Like this is a
yeah,
fresh, newer. Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago was his murder, or no, last week or a couple of weeks ago was his birthday, actually. But
Yeah.
it just brought,
Memory
birthdays,
back.
death dates, anniversaries, whatever you call them, brings back emotion. So I have felt really strong grief during that time. And so that's kind of what we focused on, kind of um working through that and processing that, because that one's a little bit more fresher than some
Mm.
of the other ones. Um
Yes.
and so that's kind of what we focused on. But surrounding that is just the emotions, because he was murdered, there's still
Yes.
some unresolved anger in the way that he died.
Oh, I am very sure of that. Yes. Yeah. And you also write of losing your sister.
Two sisters.
2 sisters.
Yes.
Goodness.
Yes. The
Hmm.
first one, and what I considered like all of the losses are grief worthy and are major, but this was like when I was freshman year in college, or
Mm.
sophomore year in college, and my older sister passed away when she was 32.
Oh gosh, my twins are 32. Okay.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And at the time, so I'm like later end of teenager, like before my 20s. And I'm like, people die at this age, I'm seriously
Shocking.
like, yes, very shocking.
Shocking.
And I guess the other thing with this one that made it to me so heavy and pronounced is that my family knew that the doctor had given her a specific
Oh,
length of time
timeline.
to live, but they didn't tell me. Mm.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Uh, So
So
that
that's
was,
secondary or even
yes.
tertiary processing,
Hmm.
right? Of anger, all the processes of
Oh,
grief.
yeah.
Like, why would you not let us in on
Yeah.
this massive? loss. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But then my oldest, and so that was my oldest sister. Then my next to the oldest sister passed away 10 years after that. So that was like 98. And then this was 2011
Hmm.
when my next to the oldest sister passed away of cancer. I
Hmm.
still can remember the phone call. Like she
Mhm.
was the phone call of her telling me that the doctor had said that she was diagnosed, but it was like a promising outcome, or she had a
Okay.
promising outlook.
Uh-huh.
The doctor had a promising outlook, and I was like, okay, because it was a different kind than
Mm.
my oldest sister. And so, okay, we'll walk through this, And I got off the phone, and I'm like, oh, it just, of course, just stopped me in my tracks because I'm like, what in the world?
Yes. What
Um,
just happened?
yeah, but literally from that phone call, she died 3 months later.
Oh my. Heartlifters, we're going to take a pause here. We are going to take a deep breath and take in everything that Natasha has shared with us. Her story is filled with a lot. And I know, because I know many of you and talk to many of you, that you have stories that resonate with a lot. Perhaps your childhood was a lot. Perhaps your marriage was a lot or is a lot. Certain relationships, certain passages and seasons in your life have just been a lot. And I know that grief is a part of our lives, each and every one of us. And I wanted to make sure that we name the stages of grief clearly. Some say there are 5 stages, some say there are 7. In the 5 stages of grief, we have denial. This didn't happen. This just couldn't have happened, or this isn't happening. Anger, bargaining. If I'd only done this, or if I'd only spent more time, or if I'd only. Depression and acceptance. In the 7 stages of grief, we have shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression. The upward turn, that moment that you feel that shift, reconstruction and working through, and acceptance and hope. And I have of late heard that there is a stage that both 5 and 7 stages are including, and that is just to try to make some meaning of it, which is part of our heart lift method here. We look into our past long enough to bring it into the present in order to make sense of it and make meaning and make peace with it so that we can then move forward into our future freedom. One of the most essential parts of moving through the process of grief, and I'm bringing it into this season particularly because this is a season where we have decided to slow down our pace. And you heard it in Natasha's story. 30 years. It took her 30 years to actually go into counseling to get some much needed help. And there was a catalyst that finally brought her to that point, and that was finishing her book on grief, where she had laid her heart onto paper and then realized I've got to process this now myself. And I said in our conversation, I did the exact same thing. Writing is therapeutic. It's prayer to me. I cannot detach them from one another. When I'm writing, I'm praying and I'm praying and I'm writing. But then there has to come a time in our life where we slow down our pace long enough to care enough about ourselves to process our pain. We don't have to. It is a choice. We can repress our pain our whole entire lifetime. But here in this community, it's not what I suggest. I suggest that we invite it in, and with a caring, helping professional or a dear, intimate friend, and with God Himself, we bring it to our present so that we can make meaning of it and make peace with it.
so that we can move forward, because God promises us forward is freedom. I've seen so many times people get right to the finish line or near it and they quit. And I'm like, oh, you were so close to tasting freedom. I don't want that for anybody, anyone listening. We want to press on, press through, and reach high for our freedom so that we can live into our full, meaningful lives. One of the essential practices that I invite my clients to begin when they are processing grief is grounding. I talk about grounding quite a bit in season 4. Go back and visit Strength Has Many Faces. Writing your moment of gratitude. Along with grounding, we invite a gratitude practice into our life as well when we're processing grief. Remember, we hold things in both hands in this community. We hold joy in one hand and sorrow in the other. And today we're inviting the practice of holding grounding and gratitude alongside of our grief. They're beautiful companions to journey you through your grief. And then a grateful perspective. And in season 5, I have a beautiful meditation called Grounded in Grace. And I invite you to bring those into your life this week. Even if you're not particularly in a season of grief, listen anyway and build up your muscles, right? Build up your grief muscles so that when and if you are called to a season of grief in your life, you will be well prepared. You will be well armed. Does that mean it'll be a perfect, easy experience? No, but we can do the work beforehand in our lives so that when life does get tough, we have tools in our mental and emotional and spiritual health toolbox. I want to leave us with these beautiful words by my favorite Irish poet, David Whyte, in his book, Consolations, the solace, nourishment, and underlying meaning of everyday words. Ground. Ground is what lies beneath our feet. It is the place where we already stand, a state of recognition, the place or the circumstances to which we belong, whether we wish to or not. It is what holds and supports us, but also what we do not want to be true. It is what challenges us, physically or psychologically, irrespective of our hoped-for needs. It is the living, underlying foundation that tells us what we are, what season we are in, and what, no matter what we wish in the abstract, is about to happen in our body, in the world, or in the conversation between the two. To come to ground is to find a home in circumstances. To come to ground is to find a home in circumstances and in the very physical body we inhabit in the midst of those circumstances. And above all, to face the truth, no matter how difficult the truth may be. To come to ground is to begin the courageous conversation, to step into difficulty, and by taking that first step, begin the movement through all difficulties to find the support and foundation that has been beneath our feet all along, a place to step onto, a place on which to stand, and a place from which to step. So powerful. Ground is what lies beneath our feet. It is the place where we already stand. A state of recognition, the place or the circumstances to which we belong, whether we wish to or not. It's what holds and supports us. So when we're in a season of difficulty, when we are finally waking up to process deeply recessed and repressed grief or pain or angst. We need to make sure we have a grounding and a gratitude practice in both of our hands and our feet firmly planted on the ground. If you need to be grounded, sometimes I just walk out back because right now it's summer where I live and the sidewalk is very hot and sometimes it's too hot and then I have to run, but it wakes me up and I feel the earth beneath my feet. Sometimes I go in the front yard and it's luscious grass and I just feel the coolness of the earth that is under the grass. Grounding and then gratitude. That heart lifter is how we can move through any season in our life with more grace. Stay tuned, heart lifters, for our bonus episode releasing this Friday, where Natasha and I continue our conversation, and Natasha shares some helpful nuts and bolts, practical tips and things that have helped her in her journey of processing her grief and also have helped her learn the power of just sitting with another person in their process. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and if you would, it is never too late to leave a review. Just go to JanelleReardon.com/podcast, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you will see it laid out for you so easily. I'd appreciate that with all of my heart, and I hope and pray that you will meet me here on Friday and over on Instagram at Janelle Reardon. Look for the post of the release of the podcast episode that day and join me and our community in an ongoing conversation. And be sure to take a step outside today and feel the earth underneath your feet.
Thanks for listening today. It was great having you here. For even more great content and resources, please join the Stronger Everyday online community at JanelleReardon.com. Always remember, you, my friend, have value, worth, and dignity.